Hello everybody and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope we're doing well, and today we'll be talking about SpiderMan No Way Home and its opening in South Korea, as this film does get a slow rollout over the next few days in various countries, with of course it premiering tonight in the United States. I've already got my ticket to go see it, and I can say just from my own local area that many of the show times are indeed either sold out or very close to being sold out, so I believe the hype for this film is very real. All of the early estimates that this film will easily cross $100 million domestically in its opening, I think, are very well founded, and that there's a very good chance of this film being not just the biggest release of the pandemic era, but also even giving some of the other former pre-pandemic Marvel films opening day a run for its money, even including box office record holders for the month of December. Of course, let's not get ahead of ourselves. We need to actually see what the Thursday numbers will be, and we'll get that update sometime tomorrow. And then, of course, we'll get our final box office predictions from the industry, so-called experts, tomorrow as well. And I will say, first, right off the bat, that many of the times that they've made predictions, especially when they have said films will be successful, they have been wrong. And again, those numbers have been usually off, either being too little or too much. And so, of course, we'll be following that. But I will say, as far as this film doing well at the box office, it does seem to be true that this film has a lot of potential, especially with this number now coming in from South Korea. So before going any further, though, please make sure you smash that like button, light that fire button if you're watching over on Odyssey, and also make sure you subscribe to the channel with that bell notification turned on. That way you know every time a new video or live stream goes live on the channel. So as you can see from this headline from Deadline, see, I rhyme there. From the box office section, it says SpiderMan No Way Home swings into Korea with 5.3 million opening day, topping Far From Home and setting pandemic record. Now, some people might say, oh, look, a record. But I don't really care much about pandemic records at this point in time. What interests me the most of this headline is the fact that SpiderMan No Way Home, right, the latest Spider-Man film, has actually beaten the last Spider-Man film, Far From Home, on its opening day. And the reason why I want to focus on that is because one of the things that I've seen as a trend, especially in the comment section on my videos, whenever I talk about the box office stuff, is simply people just putting one word, and it's Omicron, you know, or something about the pandemic, or using the pandemic as an excuse as to why films have had gigantic financial losses and why films aren't performing well. For instance, that was the main excuse for West Side Story. But then I see films like Venom 2, which made 10 million more than the original Venom did in its opening weekend domestically. I then look at films like this, which are doing better in this specific country, at least, than its previous film. And I think that this weekend especially is going to really turn that narrative on its head, because is it true that the pandemic has had an impact on the box office? No doubt. There is no doubt about it. Especially when you look into the fact that many cities and many states put in draconian lockdown measures, put in draconian, limitations on theater sizes, etc., even though there had not been any indication whatsoever that there was any major outbreaks from theaters. So we look at that and we say, of course, box office numbers were impacted. You then also look at some of the polling that's been done about people wanting to go to the theaters or feeling comfortable to go to the theaters again. And it does show that there is a pretty sizable portion of the typical movie-going public who say that they don't really want to go back to a theater right now. What we also know, though, is that the studios, obviously to both adapt and also to placate this instead of trying to fight these draconian measures, using the powers of their own dollar, they instead said, okay, we will placate to this and we will release things on streaming, day-and-date release, like Warner Brothers did with HBO Max, which ended up costing them probably a sizable amount of money. They also, of course, put things out for free, like Disney Plus did on multiple occasions by putting various films on their platform, Disney Plus, available for free. Obviously, they also did some Disney Premier Access numbers, which, again, still also leaves a lot of questions more so than answers as far as how well some of their films did when you look at the actual numbers that they have released. And, again, kind of missing some numbers and missing some data there. But in the end, what you find yourself with is nothing but a bunch of people making excuses, because what we have seen during the pandemic era is that, especially in the year 2021, there are films that have been able to rise above it. There are films that have been able to make money. And the easiest thing to really point out as to what has been the result of these films making money is really a combination of a couple of things. One, the film having a decent budget, a sizable budget, but, fair, meaning that it's over bloated, as is the case with most Disney film releases, and also that it's a product that was able to, either through marketing or just by simple concept of itself, drive people to actually want to go see it, creating it into an event, creating it into an event film, or at the very least making people excited enough about it to say, you know what, I am willing just to go out into public to go and watch this film no matter what measures I have to go through. Because that's the other thing too that oftentimes doesn't get talked about. Sometimes people don't want to go to the theater not because they're afraid, not because they're afraid of Omicron, it's because they don't want to wear a mask throughout the entire show, like some theaters in some states and some cities are requiring people to do. Because that is ridiculous. I know, River, I totally agree. Thank you for agreeing with me for once. But no, seriously, like that is also something else that is oftentimes not put into the overall metric. But let's go ahead and look into what has been going on this year before diving further into the story. By the way, I got a new chart. Yes, I got a new chart over at the website. So I've decided to, I know, I'm excited as well, River. I've decided to, kind of upgrade it a little bit, but in a way, it's better, and in a way, it's not as good, in my own opinion. Everyone's going to have their own personal preference, but this is the box office chart that I have been using for a very long time, but I'm now using it based on Excel and not Google Sheets, and one of the things that people have been begging for who care about this kind of stuff is the fact that, oh, wait a minute, look at that first column. It is finally frozen. So for some reason, Google Sheets does not allow for it, whereas this one does. So anyway, let's go into Spider-Man No Way Home first. So as I mentioned in previous videos, the budget for the film was finally announced, $200 million, meaning that the total marketing cost is around $300 million, meaning the break even for the film is going to be around $500 million. This film could easily get to around the $300 million range worldwide in its opening, meaning that the film will absolutely break even and probably be well on its way to $1 billion. Now, there are many people who are out there saying, well, without China, there's no way this film reached $1 billion, and I actually would not necessarily agree with that. When you have films, for instance, like Joker, which were able to, on an incredibly low budget, make $1 billion without China, we know that it is possible, let alone for a giant budget, giant character like Spider-Man, of course, is Sony property, by the way, to be able to do the same. So I would actually very much disagree that they need China in order, they need the communist dollar to be able to get to the $1 billion mark, especially since, again, as soon as they reach that break-even point, they're making net gain, net profit, and then they split 75-25 with Sony getting 75% of the money since they put up 75% of the actual production budget because they own the property, and Marvel put up 25% because Disney does not own the property because it's a Sony product. What we can see, though, is that there are obviously not just about, again, the fact that the break-even number is $500 million, but getting to the point I was making previously, just simply about what we were seeing from the box office. All these numbers in red, these are financial losses, right? So right now, West Side Story is at a $139 million loss. Resident Evil, Welcome to Raccoon City, $41 million. House of Gucci, $55 million loss, right? But what we can see is that throughout the year, there are sprinkled films that have been able to actually make money. So one that was very much a surprise to me because it went well beyond the expectations that I had ever considered, and most people's considerations for that matter. No Time to Die has made $12 million in profit. Halloween Kills, $48 million in profit. Addams Family 2, which also had a digital release, $27 million in profit. Venom 2, $131 million in net gain, net profit. Oh, but yeah, the pandemic. Yet a film made over $100 million in net gain, net profit. Shang-Chi, right? Some people disagree with me on this one, but based just on the pure metrics that we have available to us, $33 million in profit. The only profitable Marvel film this year, by the way. Candyman, $7 million in profit. Again, that was a lower budget film. Paw Patrol, $23 million in profit. Free Guy, $21.4 million in profit. Old, $26 million in profit. Escape Room, $8 million. So as you can see, there are films. Forever Purse, $129 million for the Fast and Furious franchise. In the Heights, Peter Rabbit 2, $16 million. The Conjuring 3, $52 million. Quiet Place Part 2, $75.5 million. So there are plenty of films that came out in 2021 that made a lot of money. There are also a lot of films that did not. But as I said, the interesting thing about all of these films and which films made money and which films did not is, one, the budget, and two, whether or not it had an interesting concept or a fan base that was intrigued enough to want to actually go out and watch it and go out and see it. Those are the two factors that we have really seen so far. So even though Old was not a very good film, because Shyamalan Ding Dong as I like to call him, was on a pretty decent run with films like Split and then films like Glass, people said, hey, I'm putting a lot of trust into him being back on track, and unfortunately, he really missed the mark with a film like Old, but he was able to get enough people out there just on the concept alone to go out and see the film, not to mention, of course, that the film only costs about, $27 million in total, when you take into account marketing cost. So that incredibly low amount and the very interesting marketing campaign that they did for the film is what helped lead to that film getting its money. You then also look to Shang-Chi. They were able to bank on and really cater to and really pander to Asian American audiences, and they showed up in droves to go see this movie, leading it to be over $200 million at the domestic box office alone, which is where it got the vast majority of its money from. And it was able to make some profits on top of that. So Spider-Man No Way Home is in a good position because, one, it's got the hype. The hype is very real. This article, I think, really shows that because not only is it doing well in South Korea, it's beating a previous pre-pandemic film. And that's something that for some reason, some people just can't quite get. How is it that you can blame Omicron, that you can blame pandemic on all other box office woes? And yet, as I've shown, there are plenty of exceptions to that. There are plenty of films that were still able to make their money back. Some of these films even having large budgets, north of $100 million. So what it shows us is that people are absolutely willing to go to the box office. People are absolutely willing to go to see a movie. The question is, are they being driven to go see it because the property looks interesting to them or not? And what we've seen is that Hollywood has really shown itself to be out of ideas. Obviously, a lot of the films that are being released have already been in production for a long time, but I think what audiences are finally starting to realize is that, wait a minute, I need to be more careful with how I spend my dollar. I need to be more careful about where I spend my money because going to see a movie is quite an expensive feat. And especially as we enter into an era of hyperinflation, amongst so many other things, that is just going to increase. When you have films like Spider-Man No Way Home, though, and the way the marketing campaign for the film has been, bringing in nostalgic characters based on just the trailers alone, let alone the rumors surrounding the film, that is going to be enough to say to people, hey, this is an event. I want to be a part of it. I don't want things to be spoiled for me. I just want to go in and just sit down, shove popcorn down my face, and forget about all of the nonsense of the world. That's what escapism is. That is what the movies used to be focused on. But instead, we've gotten just release after release after release of uninteresting stories. I know, I'm mad about it too. Uninteresting stories. Woke modern identity politics narratives being thrust into our stories. Stories just being destroyed by the clear agenda-driven Hollywood narrative. And then you have a film like this, again, doing better than a previous film. Let's go ahead and just go into these numbers, though. As it says, Sony Marvels, again, Sony/Marvels. Oh, who gets first billing there? Oh, that's right, Sony, because Sony paid the most, because it's a Sony property. Grossed an estimated $5.28 million in Korea on its first day. This is significant for a number of reasons. Korea has been extremely soft of late, yet the launch day is 11% over the first day of 2019's pre-pandemic Spider-Man Far From Home, and it is the biggest day one figure for any title of the pandemic era. Korea was Far From Home's second biggest international box office market. So again, we're looking at these numbers here, and this is big news. This is huge news, in fact. It says the John Watts-directed No Way Home, which has already weaved record-breaking pre-sales overseas, also saw rollout today in the UK, France, Russia, Mexico, Italy, and France, widely outdistanced other titles during the first pair of screenings. So this is a film that is going to not only outpace and distance itself from other pandemic era, but the fact that it's already beaten a pre-pandemic by over 11% means that using just pandemic, Omicron as an excuse is not enough. It's a lot more nuanced than that. Is the pandemic a part of the equation? I've said at the very beginning of this video talking about how very much it is a part of the equation. But to try and use that as the sole excuse, to try and use that as any excuse for why a film didn't do well, is just not true. Because even though it might take into account why a film doesn't make as much money as it could have done in pre-pandemic times, as Korea and all the other films that I was able to show you make very clear, people are willing to go see movies. Question is Hollywood willing to actually make the films that people want to go see? And I think that is going to be the ultimate question at the end of the day. But what are your thoughts about this? Are you surprised that Spider-Man No Way Home is beating Far From Home, at least in the Korean market? I expect that it'll also beat some of the other previous Spider-Man releases as well. Can't wait to actually see the actual numbers as they come in, compare them to all of the other Spider-Man films, how this pans out to the other pre-pandemic Spider-Man era films, because obviously the pandemics can be brought up in every single article talking about this movie. And we'll go ahead and see exactly how well or not well these narratives actually hold up. And something tells me that Steven Spielberg, blaming the pandemic for why his $100 million flop West Side Story isn't doing well, We'll see exactly how he's able to really hold to that when this film comes swinging into the box office, destroying the narrative. But anyway, let me know your thoughts about this in the comment section below, especially that pinned comment, as I get notified when people comment there. If you like this video, smash that like button, loud that fire button. If you're watching on Odyssey, you're all amazing and beautiful people. Again, check out my website, ombreviews.com, and play around with this new charts. And if you have any suggestions, let me know. And again, this is, a lot of fun. If you want to see some of my methodology, it is underneath the Star Wars explanation right here. The reason why it's down here, not at the very top, is because it can get a little messy, a little clouded, a little crowded up top, and I just wanted the chart to be the first thing here. Also, the one thing that I've noticed with the Excel documents specifically is that they don't load nearly as quickly, and so that's why I actually right now have a second page, a hidden page, as it were, if you want to have an early indication of what films did best and worst at the box office this year. As you can see, the Excel is taking a while to load, whereas the Sheets has actually loaded up relatively quickly. But if you want to see a little early indication about what studios did best and what studios did worse, you can actually go down here and look at Warner Brothers. Oh, I wonder how Warner Brothers did this year. Oh, wait a minute. Let's see. Ooh, that's not good. Yeah, that's the entire year. $701 million loss. They were the biggest loser of this year. But don't worry, I'll have more about that and go into more detail about that when I actually update the numbers, double check the numbers, etc. And there it is. As you can see, it took a while for that to actually load up. But let's just say these are in a specific order as far as what films and the most successful and the least successful studios. But I cannot wait to make that video for everybody. Anyway, you guys are all amazing, beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge shout out to all of my December Patreon Subscribe Star and Locals members. Animation commentator Brandon, Brian P., Christopher Bowman, Dolores Ed, Dion, Father Christopher Miller, Hail to you, Father, Father Damian Cook, Garrett Searles, Hannibal Grimm, Harold Francis, Inflamed Wood, Jacob Juice, Jeff Toon, Joe Horn, Jonathan Carney, Gomer Kyles 79, Laura, The Modern Major General's Story, Mike Jackson ×4, Mitch Dunaway, Mad Mitch Dunaway, Mr. Peabody, Mondo Spieler, On to June, Orange Chat Reviews, Out of Step with Reality, Priscilla Hall, Rosetta Ullen, Stan Andrian, Teresa Martin, Theodore Bendon, and Tina Bojan, and of course, the Empress of the Universe, Tina B. Thank you very much for being my Patreon members. And for my Subscribe Star members, UAB Mad Dog, Mike Jackson, Storm Tracker, The R, Fast Reaction, Nosferatu Gatsu, Stan 4, John B., Mr. Roy, Glinzer, J. Alex McCarthy Jr., Dean Heiss / the new number 2, J-Rod, the Beer Guru, and ZK-Man. Thank you very much for supporting me on Subscribestar. And to my 4 members over on Locals.com, Kara Tharp, UAB Mad Dog, once again, Mike Jackson, Bifford a Hobbit, and Robert Barnes. Thank you for supporting me on Locals. And if you want to have your name shouted out at the end of every video and live stream, check out the top link in the video description below. It's called Willow, or .w.lo, Willow link. It'll bring you to all of my social media platforms and also to all of the various other locations that you can support the channel. You can get access to things like giveaways, where I do giveaways of 4K films, 4K steelbooks, digital codes, all kinds of stuff every single month. Also, there's a level where you get access to all of that, plus an exclusive podcast that I do with John the Flick Pick Flickinger, where you also get to ask questions that we will answer on every episode of the podcast. And at the final level, you also have the ability, the Chosen of Valhalla level, you have the ability to have all of that, plus in your first month, get a free t-shirt of your choice, any color, sent anywhere in the world, and also you get to be featured once a month on the Chosen of Valhalla live stream featured on the main channel. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, check out the link in the description. You're all amazing and beautiful people. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, God bless.